Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where we're approaching 1,000 interviews with tech leaders, CEOs, thought leaders, futurists, startup founders, and so many more that have graced their presence on this show. And I want to include some of your voices for that 1,000 celebratory episode. So if you'd like to record me just a few seconds wishing the show the best for the future, or whatever you feel is appropriate or inappropriate, simply record something on your phone using WhatsApp, iMessage, or whatever app that you use on your smartphone, and email me that audio message to techblogwriter@outlook.com. But on today's episode, we're going to be talking to Igloo Software's Mike Hicks, which will be a great listen for anyone looking for the next generation of intranet, because Igloo enable organisations to move beyond a traditional intranet to a more digital workplace. Think of it as a destination that brings people and resources together to solve critical business challenges and cultivate a strong corporate culture in the process. And I think it's worth highlighting that Igloo was named to Deloitte's 2015 Fast 50 and Fast 500 and was recognised as one of the fastest growing public and private technology companies in Canada and North America, respectively. But as CMO, Mike Hicks has more than 20 years of marketing experience. And he's also a recognised leader in global enterprise software marketing. And Mike was also Director of Marketing for Blackberry before joining Igloo too. So I want to explore and find out a little bit more about his backstory. But Igloo Software has helped so many clients, some of which are completely remote, such as Hulu and Heifer International, who are 90% remote. And they've helped them move beyond those traditional intranets to all-encompassing digital workplaces that improve communication, knowledge sharing, collaboration, and culture. But that's more than enough scene setting from me, so wrap up warm, because I'm going to beam your ears all the way to Canada so you can join me in conversation with Mike Hicks. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Mike. Can you tell the listeners a little more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Neil. And first off, thanks for having me on the show. I'm really excited to sharing some of the things that I'm seeing and some of the challenges that we're dealing with in this interesting technology space. So my name is Mike Hicks. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Igloo Software. So I lead all of the marketing and go-to-market functions for the company, everything from our branding and positioning strategy to our campaigns, how we interact with analysts, our thought leadership and opinions on what we're seeing in tech trends, and play a big role in helping shape our strategy so that we can continue on this accelerated growth path that the company is on and remaining a leader in this space.
Excellent. And before we talk about the future and the trends that you're seeing in the industry, I always try and explore the backstory of every guest and how it helped them get where they are today. So I couldn't help but notice that you were the Director of Marketing for Blackberry before joining Igloo. So can you tell me a little bit more about that time at Blackberry and any lessons that you learned along the way? And did it actually lead or does it help you in your role at Igloo today?
Yeah, definitely. And, I love going back to those BlackBerry stories, like especially around here in this region. I mean, BlackBerry was a Canadian company. It was based in Waterloo. At one point in time, there was over 20,000 employees globally. We had, I think it was 21 different buildings in this city alone. So it was really an interesting time for the region, for me, as part of my career. I was always in the mobile device management side of the company. So essentially what that is the software that organizations would purchase to manage and secure their BlackBerry phones. So I wasn't involved in the marketing per se of the hardware. But what's interesting about being on that mobile device management side of the business is inside that big, massive company, that was essentially treated as a startup. So we had to be lean, we had to be mean, and while we were the incumbent in that software mobile device management space, eventually with the introduction of iPhone and Android devices, BlackBerry became under a lot of competitive threats. So as a marketer and a strategist in that space, it was really interesting to look at how do we go from trying to fend off these competitors to essentially losing market share to these competitors, and then what are some of the strategies that we can get to regain some of that. And we had a lot of success. And if you look at some of the things that I put in place when I was there, I left the company around 3 years ago. That's the foundation now for that business overall. I mean, BlackBerry is essentially out of the hardware game. It is a software company, and they've expanded beyond the mobile device management side of the business to include things like car automation and other stuff. But a lot of the core of what me and the team built there is still the foundation of that company. So as I look at how I ended up at Igloo or any other kind of scaling company in this region, and that was another nice thing about BlackBerry is it created such a tech hub here. So many businesses and so many successful businesses have spun out of the engineering groups and all the other people that found themselves out of the job as that company sort of collapsed and reinvented itself, that now there's such a vibrant tech community here. So how it landed me here is all those strategies and techniques that we had to use inside of this huge company, which was essentially a startup from my point of view, now brings me to a company like Igloo where I can apply that same stuff and say, okay, how do we put in infrastructure to scale, and how do we accelerate that growth, and then how do we maintain our leadership position? So it's actually teed me up perfectly for this role here.
And I'm fascinated because you did say that if you look at a big company like BlackBerry and how they went into the hardware business, but now they're out of that game and into software. I'm curious, in marketing, have you seen any big changes throughout the years?
Well, I've never witnessed that kind of a situation, and I'm not aware of one either. Maybe you could say it's a company like IBM through their hardware transition into software, but on a much different scale and a much different competitive dynamic. I think what was so interesting about that BlackBerry time is iPhone and Android came out of nowhere, and the ability to capture market share at such a fast rate. And it was the right approach from Apple in terms of consumerization, and applications were going to be the driving factor. And BlackBerry always held on to, well, it's enterprise security and management and messaging that are going to be the key driver. And, they made a bet that didn't pan out. And then, Google just came in on the heels of that and said, okay, well, I'm going to turn this into a 2-horse race and follow the strategy of Apple. And, that's why we have Apple and Android today, and we don't really have BlackBerry anymore.
And there's such a fantastic startup scene in Canada at the moment, isn't it? I was chatting with the guys in the Mars Discovery District in Toronto recently, and there's a real encouragement of actually bringing people into the country and bringing that tech talent in, isn't there?
There is, and we have a significant brain drain problem here. So we've got some amazing engineering and science and mathematics universities, but the allure of Silicon Valley and the salaries that those companies will pay to get these top graduates out. Canada right now has a challenge on their hands around losing graduates and then trying to lure them back later. And it's a much more difficult proposition when they've established a family and a life down in San Francisco to try to get them to come back. So there's a lot of work that happens with the federal Canadian government to put in programs and strategies to prevent this brain drain, because it's hurting us. And, but the fact is we've been so successful as developing a tech hub despite all of that. Can you imagine what would have happened and what will continue to happen if we can keep these graduates here and continue to build out our technical brainpower? Canada is, we're known for being an apologetic nation, but I think in this tech war, we're going to dig our heels in and we're going to continue to fight it out, because there's a ton of innovation here and there's a ton of opportunity for us.
There really is. And here in 2019, of course, you're working with a digital workplace tool called Igloo software. And for people that are just hearing about Igloo for the very first time, can you possibly expand on the kind of problems you solve for your customers, and also what makes it different from other solutions out there?
Yeah, definitely. And, so you can think of Igloo as a next gen intranet. And what's funny about this space is, 9 out of 10 people that you meet, they say they hate their corporate intranet. And it's because of the way those original intranets were structured and designed and how ineffective they were at the user experience. So Igloo essentially solves all those problems. We have a collection of digital workplace solutions that are designed specifically to solve line of business challenges that improve communication, collaboration, knowledge management, and employee engagement. So we do that in a much more usable way. We do it in a way that empowers employees to work the way that they want to. We integrate with all of the personal productivity and other applications that the business relies on. So we're looking at why did intranets of the past fail, and what do we need to do to ensure that they don't fail moving forward. So for us, this is a very exciting time, and I know we're going to talk about some of the other technical influences in this market right now, but it's also a time of confusion for a lot of organizations as they're trying to make sense of these different layers of tools that their employees want to use and how to integrate them and how to get the most productivity out of those tools and connect people in a more meaningful way.
And I'm glad you mentioned those different layers of tools out there, especially around the collaboration tool walls, as companies such as Slack falls into the background and Microsoft Teams comes into the forefront. So is there any kind of insights that you can share around that world of collaboration tools?
Yeah, and I think, in order to do that, it's probably a good idea to look back as early as 1990, because there's an interesting view that we can paint here where inside of any organization, you have three key personas. We call them the me, the we, and the us. So the me is the individual employee and what they need to get their work done. And then there's the we, and that looks at the teams and how do teams collaborate and work on projects together. And then you have the us, which is the corporate level. And as a company, what information do we want to disseminate out to employees? How do we share our mission, vision, values? What kind of behaviors do we want? And how do we build a culture? So if you go back to, as early as maybe 1990, you get into the SharePoint era where it was this top-down intranet. It was really driven by the needs of the company. So in my vernacular, that would be the us. Document repositories, top-down communication, low adoption, and lots of failed implementations. And that's essentially, that trend lasted until around 2008. And that's essentially why Igloo exists, because of how those failed intranet brought such frustration. We knew there had to be a better way. So enter the birth of Igloo, say around 2008. But 2008 also brought with it a major change, and that was the social era. So you can think of that is the age of the me. So employees wanted to ensure that they had a voice. They wanted choice and preference in the tools that they used. And there was this consumer app expectation. So I want things to be simple and easy. So you started to see the employees rise up and demand more connection and more social capabilities. So you have this social era. And then you get into, say, 2015, 2016, Slack enters the picture, and we'll call this the sort of team collaboration era, or in, my me, we, us analogy, that is the we. So now we're talking about the importance of teams and this belief that connecting teams can break down the productivity barriers. Everything needs to be fast and instant. You transition people from email into, you can almost even call it a stream of thought. If you think about how Slack or Microsoft Teams are structured with these multi-channels, and it's just everybody putting every possible idea and statement in there, you almost even can't follow it anymore. So you have that, and then now what you have is sort of this consumption era, and it's taken maybe 2019. So you've got this shift in power of companies to individuals, now to teams, and now you have this idea of everything's in the cloud, so everybody's fighting for cloud consumption, which is changing a lot of the dynamics of what tech companies are saying to their customers, what software vendors are trying to do. So now you have a market share grab on their hands. So, Microsoft is known for being a late entrant to a hot market. They will do quick innovation. They'll block others out. So now what you have is companies have to make a choice around how do they want their employees to work and which persona is going to be the lead persona. And Igloo's right in the middle of this, which is really exciting for us because we're trying to help bring all these things together, create a digital destination for all of these three personas so that they can live in a cohesive way inside the digital workplace. So this team stuff and this other stuff, are we just shifting the problem from, say, email and file repositories to now these bucketed multi-channel communication stacks? And I think we are. And one of the things I want to talk about too is the impact on knowledge management. So I'll sort of pause there and get your take on that kind of long-winded history lesson. But I think it's really important for us to understand that we've never seen anything like this before in the tech world, and the impacts that it has on how we work, they're completely unknown at this point.
Absolutely. And of course, the other thing that's really taken off over the last 5 to 10 years is the rise of remote work. I'm curious, what kind of impact have you seen that having on the modern workplace?
Oh, it's been huge. And we did a study every year, actually. We do a study. We call it the State of the Digital Workplace. And we poll over 2,000 full-time employees in North America and get their take on a whole bunch of different things. And one of them is mobile work. And what we found in this latest edition of the study is that mobile workers are finding themselves at more and more of a disadvantage as the years go on. Like one of the stats, 57% of people say they miss out on important information because it gets communicated in person, or they've been excluded from brainstorming meetings because the company doesn't have the right level of technology to effectively allow them to participate in those remote working sessions. So you end up with this really interesting dynamic of we're promoting this idea of work remote as a benefit, but yet organizations aren't providing the employees with the tools that they need to be effective.
So I also read that you've got a great theory about why the internet never died. It just transformed into the digital workplace. Can you share that with me today? Because it's a fantastic vision.
Yeah, and I think it comes back down to this idea of document repositories, and it's essentially, in the olden days, people would go there to get a piece of information to help them make a decision or support a decision that they already made. And what's happened is everybody wants the employees working in a consistent place, and there's a lot of importance around knowledge management as employees are staying at their jobs for shorter periods of time and new people are coming in and out of projects all the time. Knowledge management becomes a very critical issue. And this idea of data silos that appeared in the past, we have to try to find a way to better solve it. So that's why the intranet never really died. It just transitioned into a way and more of a destination where people are doing their work inside of it as opposed to just going to it to get something and then leave. Now what we want is employees actually documenting their thoughts, documenting their work in progress files in one area, posting final files to another area, assigning tasks to each other, maintaining those conversations, and doing it in a way that it's easy for executives to understand the status of projects. It's easy for new people coming into projects to understand what's going on and pick up and figure out how they're going to contribute to completing that project. So it's moved the idea of a static place that you went when you had to now a dynamic, thriving place that you go to because you want to. And that's also a big part of the evolving culture that companies are in now, because they're realizing that their digital workplace needs to be a digital extension of their corporate culture. And how do you replicate some of those things that you would do in your physical world? Like, how do you celebrate birthdays, and how do you, acknowledge people going above and beyond their normal job to solve a problem. It's they're using these digital workplaces now to share more about what's happening in the company. And it's really inspiring employees, and it's giving them this new level of personal connection that they never had before.
And so much of what we talked about today is going to resonate with them, because I think it's a universal theme that we're talking about. But just to help them actually understand the kind of difference that you're making to your clients, can you share how Igloo softwares help clients, some of which are completely remote, for example, like Hulu, and I think Heifer International's 90% remote, and how you've helped them move beyond traditional intranets to this all-encompassing digital workplace?
Yeah, and it really comes down to these 4 key pillars: communication, collaboration, knowledge management, and then employee engagement. And we're providing them with the solutions. And this is what I think is different about today's intranet or digital workplace versus before. It's how it gets configured to solve a very specific problem. So if you think about things like project rooms or virtual town halls or a marketing knowledge base, we're looking at all of the different challenges that people would run into, like where do I find this final file, or how do I add an agenda item to the virtual town hall, and getting these conversations out of email and putting them into a centralized forum where people can go to connect. And it really comes down to companies, when they're looking at their digital workplace, they have to prioritize one of those 4 pillars. So is communication the biggest thing that I want to address first, or maybe it's collaboration, or maybe it's knowledge management, and then that will dictate how you structure your digital workplace so that you're solving your primary use case first. And then you start to move out and expand beyond that, and to really embrace this idea of this is a destination. This is a place that employees are going to continue to come back to throughout the day. And this is what we want, is people working in here, because then it'll break down these collaboration barriers. A lot of times projects stall or things don't move forward because I don't know how to find the expertise that I'm looking for, or I don't know that there is a project that I should be contributing to. Well, with all of this information centralized, it helps bring these people together and break down these cross-functional collaboration barriers and really change the productivity and the innovation. So if you think about some of our clients, yeah, we've changed how they work. We've changed their starting point from being perhaps their email inbox or some kind of file repository to the homepage of their intranet, where they understand what's priority for that day. They can connect with senior leaders in the organization to understand how their role helps contribute to the mission, vision, values. We're creating this whole new dynamic and bringing all of these remote people together in a way that helps them feel like they're more involved in the day-to-day workings of the company, as opposed to just being a remote employee and working on a PowerPoint and then emailing it to somebody else and hoping that they get back to them.
I'm curious, do you have any almost before and after examples that could highlight how you can improve communication, knowledge sharing, collaboration, and culture, just that will help bring what we're talking about to life and how it will work in the listener's world too?
Yeah, I think a good example is, take the production of, maybe something like a white paper. Typically what would have happened is someone would say, we need a white paper. They would email that request out. Then someone would email a draft version of an outline, and then someone maybe would email that out to an agency, and an agency would create a draft version of it. And then you would maybe email the white paper now to your sales team and say you have a new sales asset that they can use. So the problem with all of that is it's all point in time, and it relies on people's understanding that the knowledge sits inside the email inbox. The way we change that is the request now for that white paper goes into a forum, perhaps on the marketing page. So everyone can see now there is a request for a white paper, and that marketing is working on this white paper. Then when the drafts are being circulated for review and feedback, those are all being circulated through the digital workplace through file versioning control, and people can comment and you can understand the status. Then when the final white paper is done, it gets posted to the marketing knowledge base. So everybody in the organization, whether they've been there for 10 years or they just started yesterday, knows that's where I go to get the final things. And then you do, a blog post to your sales team to say, hey, everybody, this new white paper that you've been asking for is now finally ready, and it's here, and you can get it from the knowledge base. Oh, and alongside of that, we're going to give you some objection handling questions. We're going to give you an additional PowerPoint that's complimentary and will tell you who this white paper is for. So all that knowledge and insight and information now lives permanently inside that marketing knowledge base so that everybody has access to it. And when there's a new version, you just update the version and everybody gets instantly notified that the version has changed and they can go get it. So it's about changing workflows. It's about bringing more openness to the work that's happening. And it's about keeping everybody in the loop without bombarding them with information. And it removes the reliance on things like email as your primary communication channel.
You've seen the digital landscape continuously evolve over the last 10, 15, 20 years, and it's going to continue to do that and move at breakneck speed, no doubt. So what is your grand vision for Igloo software and the future and continuously evolving with these changes?
Yeah, I think, the grand vision for us here at Igloo is to be the destination and the presentation layer as we look to integrate all of these different tools, right? No matter what happens, employees are always going to need personal productivity tools. They're going to need to create Word documents. They're going to need to create presentations, spreadsheets, whatever it is, they're going to need to be able to create that. Then they're also going to need to rely on the workflow and back-end enterprise systems that they need to do their job, process orders, or whatever it is that organization does. And then they're going to need to know things about what's my benefits package, or how do I request a vacation day, or some of those HR type things. And then they're going to want to connect socially with their employees and celebrate their achievements and do all those fun things, or maybe join clubs or do whatever. So at Igloo, we want to bring all of those different tools and technologies that organizations need for work to happen. We bring them together. We create that destination, we create that presentation layer, and that creates the idea of a centralized culture where no matter where the employees are scattered, we all feel together and we all feel as one because we're part of this single digital workplace.
What a fantastic vision. So before I let you go, I think there's going to be a lot of people listening that are going to buy into that vision too and just want to find out a little bit more about what you guys do. So can you remind them of where they can find Igloo online, and also maybe contact a member of your team if they're left with any other questions?
Yeah, definitely. So you can find us online at www.igloosoftware.com. We've got a great overview video on the site. We've got the ability to request a demo. And if anybody wants to reach out, they can reach out to me. I'd be happy to hear from you. So mhicks@igloosoftware.com.
Well, a huge thank you for coming on today. You've got a great personal backstory, but I also love what you're doing at Igloo and also what you're doing for the future there in this digital age that all businesses are having to adapt to at the moment. So a big thank you for taking the time to come on and share your story with me today.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I really appreciate it.
I loved hearing about Mike's career at Blackberry and how it played a big part in his future journey. But of course, here in 2019, I love talking about the collaboration tool wars as Slack is falling into the background and Microsoft Teams is starting to come into the forefront. And of course, the impact and the rise of remote work and what it's having on today's workplace. And finally, of course, why the intranet never died. It simply transformed into the digital workplace. But what did you think of today's conversation? Please let me know. Email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweet me at Neil C. Hughes, or pop by my website, techblogwriter.co.uk, where you'll find lots of information about today's episode, all the other episodes, and maybe a few other value bombs too. But that's it for me today. So a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.